Shemai pal, hello everyone. This is Benjamin and today we're talking about Llywelyn ap Gruffydd, Llywelyn and Llywelyn. Llywelyn, our last leader. We tend to, when we're talking about this man, focus so much on the last two wars and especially the last war, in which it came to this brutal, horrific climax with King Edward the psychopath next door. But we forget in that horrific nightmarish conquest that this man, when he lost that war, was old. And he had a long history all the way behind him for 40 years. And so we're going to talk about that today. How did this man rise to power? And what was his story before the tragedy at the end of his life? Because his whole life was not a tragedy. We come to that sad moment in Welsh history in which we were conquered, in which the independent existence of our people was snuffed out. It was a horrific moment and a dark period in our history, there's no doubt. But it didn't appear that way in the years running up to it. There was a shimmering and burst of new life, the cusp of something new, a principality recognized by England. It's just that as we were about to form that new feudal state, we had to deal with a psychopath dictator next door. But years before, Dafydd ap Llywelyn died unexpectedly in 1246. And before that, if you remember in the last video, I'll put it here, he had a brother Gruffydd ap Llywelyn. These two wrestled for control of that kingdom, Dafydd winning and Gruffydd dying imprisoned more than once. Llywelyn ap Gruffydd had three brothers, which this would normally be very disastrous in trying to figure out who was going to rule, and it was for much of the time. And when the king ran over Gwynedd after Dafydd died unexpectedly, he parcelled out Gwynedd to his three sons. Owain ap Gruffydd, the oldest, Llywelyn ap Gruffydd, the middle child, and Dafydd ap Gruffydd, the youngest. I forgot to mention there is a fourth son here, Rhodri ap Gruffydd. And Rhodri is the only one to escape the later conquest unscathed, because he marries into England and lives over the border for most of his life. He manages to not be executed, which is frankly a miracle. And his grandson would be Owain Lawgoch, meaning Owain of the Red Hand. And Owain Lawgoch would declare himself Prince of Wales and try to invade Wales, to liberate it from English rule later. Now, three sons with different lands ruling over this kingdom, and the eastern half, essentially, of their core kingdom, taken from them and occupied by England. This was not sustainable, certainly for any ambitious Welsh prince. But which one of these three was going to be the ruler, they could not decide, and Llywelyn ap Gruffydd seemed to figure things out first, and he knew that Gwynedd had to build a lasting feudal dynastic state and principality in order to survive as a country, Wales even. And so when the King of England began to favour Dafydd and give him lands, Llywelyn would have none of this. He declared himself the rightful ruler of Gwynedd, and he met Owain and Dafydd in battle to decide this in 1255 at Brynderwen. He won that battle, and he imprisoned both of these two brothers. Owain, his oldest, he would imprison for the next 20 years. Not a kind fate. But his younger brother David, he pardoned. This is a very different way of looking at things. Why would he do this? Well, he also only married ever one woman, or was with one woman, it appears, which is again very different. He was looking at dynastic rule from the point of not making his father's mistakes, Gruffydd, who had feuded so much with his brother that it led to his father's death. And so he was trying to gain legitimacy in the eyes of English law to rule Wales. And he let his younger brother, which would not be the natural ruler in English law, go. But he kept in chains his older brother, who would have right in English law to rule. The first mention of Gruffydd ap Llywelyn is in Dyffryn Clwyd in the 1240s. He's mentioned owning land there, which is key for later in this video and the next, because those lands would be taken at the end of this war, or the earlier one, David ap Llywelyn, on whose side an early Llywelyn ap Gruffydd joined, fighting in that region. And then after it was occupied at that time by England, it was later given to a young English prince named Edward the Psychopath. Following the death of David ap Llywelyn and the war in the Prefeddwlad, the gut country, the middle country, there's a bit of a peace, briefly, which is quite rare in Wales at this time, and Llywelyn goes with Richard of Cornwall to the Holy Land, and this potentially does three very important things if we're thinking about the character of this young prince. One, Richard, he built a castle at Tintagel in Cornwall, and there's no real strategic significance there. It simply suggests that he was aware of the King Arthur legend, and he was trying to invoke the passions and respect of the Cornish people if he was aware of their culture, language, traditions, and respected it, which, let's be honest, is quite a rarity amongst the English ruling aristocracy, or in general, frankly. Sorry, but you did wipe out the language, I mean, come on. Anyway, on the journey to the Holy Land, was there a cultural exchange between these two men? Also, going to the Holy Land would have given him respect in the eyes of the papacy. They would have known that he did this. And to complete it gives you an experience and connections to a wider political world. And there's proof of this. After he comes back, you have connections with him in France, and the Scottish nobilities, especially around Comyn, acknowledge him when he says that he is the Prince of Wales. They do this before England, so that if England and him fight at that time in the 1250s, then he has allies, clearly, and wider international acknowledgement of his title. He managed to maintain a peace with the English ruling class whilst winning allegiance in the Scottish nobility and papal recognition later. But he wasn't just a man of peaceful conquest. He saw Prefeddwlad to his east, which was what he felt to be his inheritance. He immediately struck out on expansive conquest. With David, he crosses Avon Conwy in 1256, just after Edward has left, and with an army crosses and takes Prefeddwlad back. And he wins battles against armies coming to meet him in response, which are far bigger. He decimates them. He's proving early on, in the 1250s, he is an astute military commander. This region is also called Gwynedd Conwy, Gwynedd below Llywelyn Conwy. It's kind of a way of saying that the east, it's further from the political center. Here are the battles on a map here that we know he won. Significant major battles. By my count, that's 8 battles, at least. We don't even know about the smaller ones, which there would have been several, especially in his early career. We know that he sided with David ap Llywelyn in the war before when he was younger. Much of these conquests come as well when a traditionally hostile group of lords centered around Gruffydd ap Llywelyn in 1263 declare fealty and give homage to Llywelyn. Now this is historic. Traditionally, southern Powys and Gwynedd are ancient enemies by this point, but they're putting their differences aside. There is a national sense of unity slowly being battered together. And this man won a series of battles near Brycheiniog or around Brycheiniog in the south and present-day Sirgar, restoring the homage pattern of other Welsh lords under him that his grandfather had established. Llywelyn also has a considerable amount of luck in England. In 1264, his ally in the Second Barons' War in England captures young Prince Edward and the King of England. Now, he's not able to hold this without anything, but what happens is King Henry III weakens, and Llywelyn quickly takes advantage of this, and it goes through a period of expansion, again, winning victories over the English, taking advantage of their weak position, storming castles along his border. And he conquered a huge part of the other side of the Welsh lord's lands, so that he ruled directly under his crown, lands on both sides of the Welsh lords, so that those Welsh lords who were supposed to be loyal to him, he was their prince. And Henry gives in to this because he's in no way in any position to be a hard bargainer. If he goes to war with Llywelyn, he risks another civil war and rebellion erupting in England and cutting off his own head. So in 1267, at the Treaty of Montgomery, or Trefaldwyn, let's use the Welsh for place names in Wales, he is declared Prince of Wales in English law. So we have to see, Llywelyn ap Gruffydd is not just Llywelyn the Last. He has a whole history. By the time he's conquered in the 1280s, he's had a whole lifetime of expansive ambition. He makes conquests. He wins lords down into the south of Wales, over to his side. He forces the King of England to recognize his title as the Prince of Wales, the first Welsh Prince of Wales to be legal in English art. This principality, for the first time formally recognized by the king, would last 10 years. But there are storm clouds brewing, because whilst Llywelyn ap Gruffydd is able to build on the order with Richard of Cornwall, Simon Montfort, who died, and Llywelyn had to attack again to fortify his position, and through that Barons' War, and Henry III. Despite all that, enabling Llywelyn to expand, young Prince Edward over in England is noticeably different than this order. He's much less French and Norman in his attitudes and manners. He's much more boisterous and Saxon and, well, English, frankly. And I think there are signs in early Llywelyn ap Gruffydd's career that suggest he foresees this dark cloud brewing in this young prince. He's trying to fortify his position before this arrogant, horrific little spoiled brat of a psychopath takes power. And he succeeds. He succeeds beyond what anyone could have hoped for by 1267. But no one in the world could have prepared us for the dark cloud that was coming next time. I would like to say thank you very much to my Patreons on the screen now. Diolch yn fawr iawn. And thank each and every one of you for watching, commenting, joining my membership, giving a super like. Anything helps.